Hey everyone, and welcome back to our channel. The Shang dynasty had ruled China for centuries, their kings claiming to be the voice of the gods, deciphering divine will through fire and bone. But as their reign faltered, a new power emerged from the West. They didn't just seize the throne. They introduced a revolutionary idea, a concept that would echo through Chinese history for over 3,000 years. They claimed that heaven itself had chosen them to rule. This powerful belief, known as the Mandate of Heaven, became the bedrock of Chinese politics, philosophy, and identity. Today, we delve into the epic story of the Zhou dynasty, an era of wisdom, warfare, and the birth of one of history's most profound thinkers, Confucius. Let's rewind to around 1046 BCE. The Zhou, a tribe on the western frontier, led by the ambitious King Wu, marched against the ruling Shang. At the decisive Battle of Mai, they triumphed. But to legitimize their rule, they needed more than just military might. They needed a moral argument. And so, they declared that the Shang kings had become corrupt and lost their virtue. As a result, heaven had withdrawn its favor, its sacred mandate, and bestowed it upon the Zhou. This was the birth of Tianning, the Mandate of Heaven. This wasn't like the divine right of kings you see in Europe, which was absolute. The mandate was conditional. A ruler had to be just, wise, and care for their people. If they failed, heaven would signal its displeasure through disasters and famine, and the people had a right, even a duty, to rebel. For the first time, morality was woven directly into the fabric of Chinese government. With the mandate secured, the Zhou established their capital and began what we now call the Western Zhou period. To manage their vast new territory, they implemented a feudal system. King Wu granted large estates of land to loyal relatives and nobles. In return, these lords pledged their military support and allegiance to the king. This network of loyalties created a period of relative stability and prosperity. But the Zhou didn't just rely on political arrangements. They built a society centered on ritual, order, and harmony. They created intricate codes of conduct, known as li, that governed everything from court ceremonies to daily interactions. Family, respect for elders, and social hierarchy were paramount. We can see this world reflected in the beautiful bronze vessels from the era. These weren't just art. They were political documents, inscribed with royal decrees, treaties, and sacred oaths that bound the kingdom together. The Western Zhou is often remembered as a golden age, a time when political unity and spiritual balance were seen as one and the same. But as with all great powers, this golden age couldn't last forever. Over generations, the Zhou king's authority began to weaken. The feudal lords grew more powerful and independent, ruling their lands like personal kingdoms. The breaking point came in 771 BCE, when a coalition of rebellious vassals and outside invaders sacked the capital, forcing the Zhou court to flee eastward. This marked the beginning of the Eastern Zhou period. The king was now a ruler in name only, and China splintered into a patchwork of rival states. This era is divided into two phases. First, the Spring and Autumn period, where states paid lip service to the Zhou king while constantly maneuvering for power. This then descended into the brutal Warring States period, an age of relentless conflict where kingdoms battled for ultimate supremacy. It was a time of unimaginable bloodshed and chaos. But out of this turmoil, something incredible happened. The chaos forced people to think. Scholars and philosophers began to ask fundamental questions. What went wrong? How can we restore order and harmony to our broken world? From this existential crisis, the 100 schools of thought blossomed, giving birth to the foundational philosophies of Chinese civilization: Confucianism, Taoism, and legalism, all wrestling with the problem of how to build a better society. Among the many brilliant minds of this era, one teacher's voice rose above the rest: Confucius, better known to the world as Confucius. Born in 551 BCE, Confucius witnessed the moral decay and social chaos of his time and dedicated his life to finding a solution. His vision wasn't about creating new laws or conquering new lands. It was simple yet profound. Peace begins with inner virtue, and a stable society is built on respect. Respect for one's family, for elders, and for legitimate authority. He traveled from state to state, advising rulers that they must lead by moral example, not by force or fear. He believed that if a ruler was righteous, the people would naturally follow. His teachings on ethics, good governance, and personal cultivation were collected by his students in a book called the Analects. This collection of dialogues and sayings would become one of the most influential texts in human history, shaping the minds of emperors, scholars, and everyday families for over 2 millennia. Though Confucius never achieved the high political office he sought in his lifetime, his ideas ultimately outlasted every king and kingdom of his day. From the ashes of the warring states, he provided China with an enduring ethical compass that still guides it today. The Zhou dynasty itself would eventually fall, its final king deposed in 256 BCE, paving the way for the unification of China under the Qin, but the legacy of the Zhou is immeasurable. It fundamentally defined how China understood power, politics, and the very relationship between humanity and the cosmos. The mandate of heaven became the ideological engine of the dynastic cycle. Every dynasty that followed, from the Han to the Tang to the very last emperor of the Qing, would claim the mandate to justify their rise and would be judged by its principles. The Zhou era transformed China, turning a period of chaos into an age of profound philosophy and turning the raw exercise of power into a deep moral responsibility. It laid the foundations for a civilization that would endure for thousands of years. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey through ancient China. If you found this interesting, please hit that like button and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss our next exploration into history. See you next time.